I'm going to go through what I'm seeing with the central bank digital currencies and talk specifically about some of this will be a little bit political because I think it, as you'll see as we go through it, it ties into what's happening in the central bank digital currencies and what they're trying to do. So if we sort of pull back a bit and look at different economic systems, different types of governments, you see this progressively methods of how things are being controlled. So obviously at the bottom, you'd have something like anarchy where there is no government. And then you would be, sort of more of a libertarian as you moved up through these different sort of governments and economic systems to what we have now here in the US, which we call a constitutional republic. So that was really what I think a response to democracy, right? So democracy is, the majority of people ruling what's going to happen. So I like to call that two wolves and a sheep that are deciding what's for dinner, right? So what the founders of the US were trying to do was make it more for a government ruled by the people and while protecting the minority, right? So you can see that in sort of our electoral college where no large cities can basically run the whole country because you have to really campaign around the country to win the electoral college. So I think the constitutional republic is a response to some of the things that happen in democracy. And so when you look at the difference between sort of pure capitalism and crony capitalism adds in the element where businesses collude with the government to gain an advantage. And I think that's really a step away, say, from fascism, where the government uses corporations to control a population, which we see a bit now with big tech censoring certain political opponents and things like that on certain platforms. And then as you go through, more and more control, and what really happens there is centralization through socialism and communism, to where you get to this point where you have authoritarianism type of governments, where it's a person, a group of people, sort of an oligarchy, or even theocracy, where they use religion to control a mass of people. And then once you have that centralization that you've moved up through socialism and communism to authoritarianism, you have the creation of super states, like something as an example like the European Union, where they consolidate all these countries to become the super state. And if you're not aware of the European Union, these are all unelected officials in Brussels that really drive policy between these group of states. And then I think the next step after sort of these super states is combining all of these unions, where you have this one government that is really dictating how this could all happen. So I'd like to pull back and look more philosophically about how things are set up, because it flows into the current money system and monetary policy. And so I think what's really important to point out is that as this happens, you're losing freedom as the centralization comes about, whether it's in an economic system or through a government. So I think these people who want to put this in place, I think nothing's off the table for them to really try to accomplish this state of control. To me, it's about freedom and control, and then the method to move from freedom to control is centralization. Right. So, what would they do? They would, demonize or censor. We saw the first time ever that a sitting president was censored. You would say your political opponents are terrorists. You would take away their ability to bank. There's lots of what they call lawfare, where you combat people in the courts to sort of take them out of being a political opponent. You saw this with people like Mark Elias at Perkins Coie. Other things you would do if you were trying to centralize would be create division, between races or people who've gotten a particular shot or not gotten a shot. You could create chaos like what we saw in Ukraine several years ago with riots and sort of this anti-police or defund the police, creating things like critical race theory, which is really taken from basically a paper called Tradition and Critical Theory in 1937. So I bring up these examples because a lot of history sort of rhymes with things that have already been attempted in the past, right? So one of the things I thought was interesting in the 2020 election was just the massive fraud. I mean, they were desperately sloppy. I've sort of had an interest in how elections have been stolen and things like that over time, but this one was particularly out in the open. You have the coronavirus, which there's been talks about, medical tyranny and how that's been one way of controlling a population. So we certainly see the elements of that. Now with the situation in Ukraine, wars are another potential way of moving this freedom to control through centralization in these types of things that can be done, right? So I think it's interesting to point this out as we get into central bank digital currencies, and you'll see why I bring sort of this larger picture up about this, because we're hearing terms about a central bank digital currency tied in with what we would call a Great Reset. So the Great Reset is really just a prepackaged term that they call Year Zero, which was coined, I believe, by Pol Pot in Cambodia. So that communist dictator wanted to basically extinguish culture and governments and then start anew, right? So this Great Reset, or Year Zero, as he would call it. So to me, this is about when I look at when a country, what they're doing or what's being discussed as far as policy, it's what freedoms are they taking away and what sales pitch or techniques are they going to use, right? So I think sort of we can see things like potentially supply chain issues even further happening as a way to move further in control and central planning of an economy. There could be more, say, terrorist attacks with maybe power outages, which we've seen some things like that, or even issues with the internet. So as you might know, the domain name servers or the DNS where your domain name is linked to a server is centrally controlled, where they could, if they don't like a website or an application, they could remove that from that connection where your website no longer links to your server. So that's one way to, if they say they don't like someone's speech, they could potentially do that. So to me, this is all about, as we talked about, the freedom versus control, the creators versus what I would call the destroyers. And then if you're a fan of the Atlas Shrugged movies, it's the producers and the looters, right? But I like to look at it from a freedom versus control mechanism. And so with that sort of landscape that I laid out, if you look at the legacy banking system, you have your local banks, state and regional national banks, then it flows into the central bank in each country. So there's all but 2 or 3 countries that don't have a central bank. What a lot of people don't know is that the central bank, there's another layer above it called the Bank for International Settlements, which is further centralization of the legacy banking and monetary system. So if you go to the website, BIS.org, so that's the website for the Bank for International Settlements, you'll see that when I talk about this, that I'm not just making it up. This was from their website. Our mission is to support central banks' pursuit of monetary and financial stability through international cooperation and to act as a bank for the central banks. So if a central bank is truly in control of a country, why would there need to be a bank for the central banks? Why would there need to be further consolidation and centralization of the banking system if a country is truly in control of its currency and there's no outside interest affecting that monetary policy? So you can go to that website. You'll see that I'm not, I'm not sort of bringing this about and to make a point. This is all sort of set out in the open and happening. So I think from a CBDC adoption perspective, they're either going to force the use of it, which I think is one option. The other option is to absorb all of the USD-backed stablecoins into the US banking system, where then they would have control of it and be able to just basically add that to the Federal Reserve Bank's control of basically this digital form of their currency. The other way, if you see all of these trillions of dollars being printed, which we've talked about quite a bit, is you just inflate the fiat into oblivion, and then you reissue a new currency, which is basically the same thing but in digital form, where you have this centralized control of the issuance and transfer of money at the central bank. And so right now the CBDC has 4 methods that they will control the monetary system within an economy. So they have the reserve requirements. So how much in reserve does each bank have to, right? And what are the interest rates that, sorry, I'm just muting some people. What are the interest rates that are charged between banks, which then affects the interest rate as a whole? And then asset purchases. So one of the mechanisms that the US was doing was buying bonds to keep the interest rate low. So you might have heard that they're going to start to unwind that and slowly purchase less as they look at interest rate hikes. So there's sort of a double mechanism that they're doing with slowing down the asset purchases and then increasing the interest rate. And then of course there's the money printing, inflating the supply to do things that they need to do within the government system for programs and things like that. So the idea for that is that when they have this method of printing money, they can use that for different political purposes. So we've talked about this before. It goes way beyond just the control of the economy, the interest rate reserve requirements, asset purchases, and printing money. They actually want to sort of put an agenda using CBDCs within their political sort of strategy that they'd like to do. So you might have heard of ESG, which stands for environmental, social, and governance. And this is all throughout papers that they write about as they start the transition into CBDCs, where they want to use this to push the different agendas around climate control, or what I would really call the implementation of a carbon tax. Certain social things that they would like to do, penalizing or rewarding people that follow certain guidelines, and then different governance around companies if you do what they like you to do and you fit into their agenda. So if you remember what we talked about, where they envision a CBDC where, if you don't spend it within a certain amount of time, they can basically delete your money, or they could shut you off if you're not fitting into what they'd like you to do as far as the agendas that they have laid out. So to me, the CBDC is another way to reach that control mechanism where you take money and affect people's behavior on what you want them to do. So this has infiltrated really the entire investment banking arm of really the US, and I think even other countries. So what I've done is go to some of the larger investment companies like BlackRock, Blackstone, and you see that this idea of ESG it's not only within the CBDC environment, but it's infiltrated the investment community, where they will either force their current portfolio to follow these guidelines, but any new investment opportunities, they want you to follow this ESG mechanism.
Why BankX was created, because otherwise this is really just software. So what I like to do in that situation is to read the Currency Creators Manifesto, which is really this reason why we have worked so hard on the BankX system. So the Currency Creators Manifesto, our world faces an urgent crisis of currency manipulation, theft, and inflation. Under the current system, currency is controlled by and benefits elite families, governments, and large banking institutions. We believe currency should be minted by and benefit the individual, not the establishment. It is time to take back control of and the freedom that money can provide. BankX is rebuilding the legacy banking system from the ground up by providing you with the capability to create currency and be in complete control of wealth creation with a concept we call individual created digital currency, or ICDC. You own the collateral, you mint currency, you earn interest, you leverage without the risk of liquidation, you lock up your currency for even more returns. All of this is done with complete autonomy and decentralization. BankX has built a stablecoin for individual freedom. BankX is the antidote for the malevolent financial system, bringing in a new future of freedom where you are in complete control with no middleman, bank, or central bank between you and your finances. This capability to create currency and be in complete control of wealth creation will be in the hands of every individual that uses BankX. By 2030, we will rid the world of the corrupt, tyrannical, and incompetent banking system, replacing it with a system where billions of people have complete freedom of their financial future. Everyone will be given ultimate freedom to use their assets to create currency, earn interest, and multiply returns to accomplish their individual goals. The mission of BankX is to be the first to mint 1 trillion in stablecoin. We will bring about this transformation by attracting people that believe what we believe. We will partner with other blockchain protocols and build decentralized applications that drive even more usage. Finally, we will deploy a private network that is never connected to the internet to communicate between counterparties, that allows for blockchain to blockchain interoperability and stores private keys in cryptocurrency wallets. Our ecosystem, network, and platform has never been seen in the market and provides us with a long-term sustainable competitive advantage. We value individual freedom. We believe in financial autonomy. We are anti-establishment. We envision a future of self-empowerment. So I spent a lot of time thinking through this manifesto to help to attract people to the BankX cause. And one of the terms that we talk about in the manifesto is this idea of an individual created digital currency. So with all the talk of CBDCs, I want to distinguish between the difference between what BankX has created and the central bank digital currencies. So when you look at a CBDC, it's not a cryptocurrency. It's very centralized, permission, it's private and closed source. They want to dictate all of the rules and policy and change those as they see fit. There is no value behind it. It's just sort of printed out of thin air, much like our current fiat system. They track and monitor you. They could force you to spend money that you're not ready to spend yet. If you don't fit into a specific political cause, they could take your money or shut your money off. And it profits few individuals and middlemen and banks. And with what we've seen with this endless money printing, it will lose value over time, just like fiat has. And it's used to control people and companies and eventually countries. So with a ICDC or an individual created digital currency, it's just you and the blockchain. It's you do what you like when you want. There's decentralized collateral with complete freedom, exact opposite of a CBDC. We are a much better inflationary hedge because our stablecoin tracks the price of 1 gram of silver. So I've seen on Twitter that people say, well, where does BankX store the silver? There is no physical silver backing the XSD stablecoin. It's backed by other cryptocurrencies, specifically the BankX token and the native blockchain token. So we track the price of 1 gram of silver, but are crypto backed as far as the collateral. There is no middleman. As I said, it's just you and the blockchain. And we have a monetary policy that is very responsible in that we're not just endlessly creating currency like the central bank does, where they print it out and give it out to their political colleagues and people that could benefit them. And in this system, you earn by creating the currency, which is very unique to BankX and never been done in the stablecoin or cryptocurrency market. So if you are new to BankX, these three socials are really where most of our activity is. Telegram at bankx.io. Twitter is also at bankx.io. And you can go to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@bankx.io. So make sure you join to keep up with the progress of BankX and to ask any questions.